Hey everyone, so today we're going to play detective. We're stepping into a classroom to solve a really interesting mystery. It's the case of the frozen learners, capable, motivated adults who were just stuck, totally unable to start their work. So the question is, what was stopping them? Let's dive in.
Okay, so picture the scene. It's a vocational electricity lab. The students are all adults, they come from a bunch of different backgrounds, and for many of them, English is a second language. And you gotta remember, this is a pretty high-stakes environment. You absolutely need to understand the instructions to apply them quickly and, safely.
And here's the real puzzle. After the teacher explained what to do, some students would get right to it, no problem. But others, they just froze. They were stuck. And these weren't students who couldn't do the work. They were totally capable. So what on earth was going on? To figure it out, we've got to look a little closer at the evidence.
Right, so like any good detective, the first thing we got to do is examine the evidence. We need to look at the specific things these students were or weren't doing. And wow, when you look at the clues, a pattern definitely starts to emerge. You see this hesitation, right? Students rereading the manual again and again. You see them kind of glancing over at what their classmates are doing before they even dare to start. Some would finally begin, but they'd get the steps all mixed up. And they constantly needed the teacher to come over and help them one-on-one, even for things that had just been explained to the whole group. Something was definitely getting lost between the instruction and the action. So, with all that evidence, it's time to line up our prime suspects. The instructor didn't just assume the students weren't skilled enough. Instead, they came up with three main suspects, or hypotheses, for what was causing this paralysis in the classroom. All right, so the investigation zeroes in on three potential culprits. First, a language processing barrier. Second, some difficulty with organizing the task. Or third, maybe something in the classroom environment itself was the real obstacle. Let's take a look at each suspect's rap sheet. Suspect number 1, language processing. Now think about it. You've got all this technical jargon for electricity, you've got these complex multi-step instructions, and you're trying to figure it all out in what might be your second language? I mean, that just creates this massive cognitive load. Your brain is working so hard just to figure out what the words mean that it's got no bandwidth left to actually do the thing. That would totally explain why they kept rereading and asking for definitions. Then we have suspect number 2, task organization. This is all about executive functioning. You can think of it like the brain's project manager. It's the skill that lets you see a big, complicated task and break it down into a logical sequence. First I do this, then I do that. If that skill is a bit of a challenge for you, you're just going to freeze up. You won't know where to start, or you'll end up doing things in the wrong order.
And our final suspect, environmental barriers. Remember how we said the students did way better when they got one-on-one help? That right there, that's a giant clue. It suggests the problem might not be entirely inside the student's head, but in the environment itself. A fast-paced lecture to the whole group can just be too much information too fast, creating that same cognitive overload we talked about.
So, with our three suspects all lined up, it was time to set a trap to see which one was the real culprit. The instructor came up with this brilliant 4-part intervention plan designed to tackle all three potential barriers at the same time. Let's see how they did it. So here was the game plan. First, give them structured visual aids, things like checklists and diagrams, so they weren't just relying on words. Second, pre-teach all that tricky technical vocabulary before they even see it in the lab. Third, set up a structured peer support system, intentionally pairing students together. And finally, use that classic gradual release model. The teacher shows how to do it, then they do it together, and then the students do it on their own. The trap was set. The plan was in motion, and the results started to roll in. It was finally time to see if the plan had actually worked and which of our suspects was the guilty party. And the verdict is in. And this is what's so fascinating. Look at what the students rated as very helpful: supporting each other, using visual diagrams, and watching the teacher do a demonstration. These are all methods that go beyond just talking. Simply re-explaining the instructions, that was only rated as helpful. It turns out the key wasn't just telling them again, it was showing them in a new way. And this right here, just perfectly shows the difference in the whole approach. The planned, proactive supports, like the checklists and the buddy system, they anticipated what the students would need and empowered them to work on their own. The unplanned support, well, that was just reactive. It took up extra time and actually made students more dependent on the teacher to get anything done. And all of this leads to the big aha moment, the solution to the whole mystery. Here's the critical takeaway.
It was never about the students' competence. They were always capable. The real problem was an invisible wall, a barrier, that was stopping them from accessing the learning in the first place.
This whole case teaches us something really profound. It forces us to make a huge shift in how we think, to stop questioning a student's ability and start questioning how we're providing them access to the material.
So let's be super clear about what this is. An access barrier is an obstacle. It could be complicated language, it could be the way something's taught, that stops a perfectly capable person from getting to the material. It's not a learning disability, it's not a problem with the student, it's a design flaw in how we're teaching.
So what does this all mean for any of us who teach or train or manage people? It means we all have to put on our detective hats. We've got to learn to see the difference between a real learning difficulty and a simple barrier to access. We have to build multiple doors into our content, visual doors, peer-based doors, hands-on doors, and we have to plan for these barriers ahead of time, because that is so much more effective than trying to fix things after someone's already lost.
And so I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. In our own work, on our own teams, or maybe even in our own learning, where are we mistaking a simple barrier, a locked door, for a fundamental lack of ability? Because solving that mystery could unlock potential we never even knew was there.